are welcome to the breakout session for CITM, or the Center for Integrated Transportation and Mobility. Again, my name is Richard Dunda. I'm the Executive Director at CITM. And I'm going to steal a little bit of floor time here and just do a brief overview of CITM and announce a couple of programs that we have before we introduce the panel. So I am going to share my screen. Everybody see that? Awesome, great. Okay, so just as a reminder, there is still time for you to join us in Hamilton on our networking event today. If you haven't registered, you can register at ftms.citm.ca. If you just show up, we will figure out how to get you a name tag. Right? But there's different color name tags depending on whether you're a client or a partner or a startup or a partner. But we'd certainly love to have you this afternoon. Just a brief overview of CITM. CITM, or the Center for Integrated Transportation and Mobility, is a technology accelerator focused on transportation clients, part of Ontario's Ontario Vehicle Innovation Network, or OVIN platform. We are focused on multimodal transportation in two broad areas and kind of 5 specific areas of focus. At the high level, we focus on smart connected transportation of all sorts, basically anything with wheels, right? And then also the electrified powertrains, and that takes you into the energy infrastructure. So we see startups from connected and autonomous vehicle space, smart transportation infrastructure or connected infrastructure. But on the powertrain side, we also see electrified vehicles and an alternative powertrains. By that, we primarily mean hydrogen and hydrogen fuel cells. That takes you into the electric and hydrogen energy infrastructure, as you just heard on the previous panel. And we also see things like mobility or transportation as a service solutions. A couple of programs to announce. Next week, CITM will launch its first ever Innovation Challenges program. One more slide on that. So you will see the webpage isn't quite live yet. You will see it at CITM-innovation/challenge. There are 2 challenges for startups to enter. Right? Our program marries industry and enterprise partners that have a challenge or a problem that needs a solution with a larger technology partner, someone like Nokia or Geotab, and invites the startup to work with them to solve that industry partner's problems. Unlike a pitch competition, this is designed to end in a pilot or a proof of concept, either in the real world or the digital world. Sometimes it's an analytics challenge. Right? So stay tuned for more on that. I'll talk about the 2 core assets that we have here at CITM. One is we own and operate and manage a smart transportation network that is 4G, 5G, fiber connectivity to various locations in the city of Hamilton and where we are located at McMaster Innovation Park. We also have industrial IoT technology, or IoT, from SmartCone, right? So various sensors deployed on the roadway, including audio, visual, environmental, radar, LiDAR, as well as V2X technology from our partner iSmartways. So if you are looking to test in a real world environment as a startup, we can help you facilitate that. And a second asset that we are bringing to market is the CITM data store. As you can imagine, all those sensors throw off a lot of data, right? And a lot of our clients need that data for analytics, whether it's pattern recognition or artificial intelligence, right? So we've created a data store of that stores and makes available the data from the sensors in our network, and we continue to add third-party data over time. So this is available for free and download, and it should launch in the next week or 2 as a new resource for startups and for partners alike. All right. Any questions, please just put them in chat. I'll move on to our panel now. So the topic of our panel today is building a company, an entrepreneur's perspective. So we have 3 entrepreneurs to talk to you today. Our moderator today is Mallory McKewen. Mallory is a senior account manager with BDC and a previous entrepreneur herself. Saad is VP at Strategic Initiatives at Gatik. Gatik is the maker of connected autonomous vehicle technology that's on trial in Mississauga and Brampton with their partner Loblaws, as well as with Walmart in the US. And if you are coming to our event tonight, you should see the Gatik van. Shirook is the CEO of ESI Informatics. She's a PhD and an innovator herself, right? Her company has created environmental sensing technology that provides kind of Environment Canada level data, but in a mobile fashion. So you can mount it on a vehicle, and I can attest to the fact that we've collected data many times now from the city of Hamilton using her device. And also joining us today is Thomas Martin, Director of Business Development at SWTCH. SWTCH is another one of our innovators. They make kind of next generation charging stations, but more importantly, they make intelligent software that manages software across those charging stations. They sell to commercial and building managers. So without any further ado, I will hand the stage over to Mallory, and we can get underway with the panel.
Perfect. Thank you, Richard. Everyone can hear me okay, right? Quick nod. Okay, awesome. Yeah, so pleased to be with everyone here today. I will be at the networking event at Hamilton later tonight, so looking forward to meeting some people in there. So I'm with BDC's Tech Lending Group. This session is not about me, nor is it about BDC. It's really about you, the entrepreneurs. So we've got 3 really diverse entrepreneurs on the stage, and I'm imagining that a lot of people in the audience are also entrepreneurs or thinking about possibly starting a business, joining a young company, things like that. Interesting perspective when we were coming up with questions for this. A lot of them do end up circling around funding a business or financing a business and what the funding roadmap looks like. So we'll dive into that a lot, but there are some other interesting topics that we've got on the horizon as well. Richard did a great job of introducing all of us, so I don't think we'll take up too much more time with introductions since we only have until about noon and we want to save some time for Q&A from the audience as well. So if you've got any questions that you're thinking of as the entrepreneurs are talking, feel free to write them down and we will definitely get to at least 10 minutes of Q&A at the end. But let's just dive right in, and if it's helpful to provide more context about your background to answer one of the questions, then we can kind of do some quasi-intros there if we need to. But let's start on kind of the funding topic. We'll start with Shirook. Where did your first 100K, so or whatever dollar amount was needed to kind of kickstart your business, where did you end up finding that? Where did it come from?
It's non-dilutive in the sense that it was from grants, but I myself put in a good chunk of that first 100K. Invested in my own company at the start. It was just me, but now we're a team of 9. But it was non-dilutive grants, pitches, pitch competitions, just working with whatever is available. Some incubators also offer support in non-dilutive funding as well, but it's small bits and pieces here and there.
Yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind that you're not always going to fund your entire roadmap on day one, but you need to think about kind of what are those milestones that I'm trying to achieve to get that next stage of funding, and where do I find what takes me there. Sam or Thomas, anything to weigh in on kind of the initial funding that got your respective businesses off the ground?
Go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah, sure. In our case, we were quite creative. We not only looked for cash, but we looked for other resources that could help reduce our burn rate in those first 2 years. One example was making use of a local incubator that was offering us free office space. So that was a huge savings in those first couple of years. And then usually through those incubators, you have access to funding, non-dilutive funding, whether it's through grants, awards. You can apply for certain internship programs for your employees. So we made sure that we were keeping a close eye on what was available to us and trying to do the best we could just to make it to that next step.
I'll add a bit to that, but I'll start with where we are today. So we completed a Series B financing. Total raised to date is 115 USD across a pre-seed, seed, Series A, Series B. Similar to Shirook, all of us really, the early days it was one and then a handful of people. Now we're a little bit over 100 employees, about 50% in Ontario, and about 50% across the US. And the reason I mention all of that is for Gatik, as we're developing B2B short haul logistics, autonomous vehicles, we're in deep tech, which means that you need a lot of R&D capital upfront before you can really commercialize the technology. But even with that said, the whole premise of the company was to commercialize as quickly as possible. So that's why we focus on a route by route commercialization strategy. So it's not a 0 to 1 step function, unlike other deep tech or specifically other autonomous vehicle plays, where you need hundreds of millions or really billions of dollars before you can start earning any countable revenue, I would say. So going back to the beginning, it was building a golf cart in a garage to try to get some pre-seed money and say, hey, here's a ragtag group of individuals. It was 3 founders initially who can build out this technology, give us a couple of million, and we could probably build out a company around the tech as well. The final point there is, even after we received our seed capital of about 5 million, we really needed to get non-dilutive funding sources. So that's when we started going after grants. And I must say that the OVEN grant, along with the other support that OVEN offers, including through CITM, was instrumental in helping Gatik accelerate its growth and pace.
Awesome. And that's a perfect segue into one of the other questions we'd kind of brainstormed. So maybe either Thomas or Shirook, thinking about your first external sources of funding, whether it's grants, I mean, some grants fund R&D, so that's always helpful, but grants or investors often do ask the question as to how do you define your traction so far, prove up that, you've got product market fit, this makes sense, it's more than just an idea. But traction isn't always defined by revenue, especially in a case like Sam's. You need a lot of funding before you're getting to revenue. So when did you first seek external funding sources, and how did you convince those sources, that there was truly something here? Maybe we'll start with Thomas, because I picked on Shirook last time.
I think it's, from our perspective, it's when we started to have second conversations with some larger entities as they realized that, we weren't just onto something niche, that we were onto something that they were also in tune thinking about. One of our pre-seed investors is a large engineering and architecture firm. And that was a validation that we were onto something. And although we were a small team, we knew that if they made a small investment in us, they would likely pull us into any related work that they were doing. And, they're 10,000 employees globally. So that was a hint that our business model was cracking into something. And then at that point, it was just looking on a 12 to 16 month roadmap for how can we use this funding and make the next step, whether it was in revenue, employee headcount, product, and weighing those options accordingly.
Awesome. Anything to add from?
For us, for our technology, we are our business model is new in the sense of how to provide data on air quality in a different way. So it was introducing a different business model, introducing a different way to do the same. So for us, it was a lot of discussions with potential clients and customers to understand and fine-tune what that business model looks like. The early pilots were very instrumental to learn from them, both for us and to fine-tune our offering once you get those first tractions and you start to pivot in terms of your messaging and your marketing strategy, that's when we started to talk to investors, because we had a bit of a clear pipeline and how we want to go about it. But it's very important to start small. It's very important to have as many conversations as you can, because even though for us as a technical team, it was clear the importance of what we are offering, it needed to be clear to the customer as well.
And anything, Sam, to add there? I know we jumped off of something you'd segued us into, but anything more to add about the early funding?
No, I think just reinforcing everything. Those early days, you're lucky if you've built something that gets the attention of potential strategic investors, because as Thomas alluded, then you get some market validation from a potential customer and potentially your first revenue dollars from that same investor. But even the insight that they can bring is superbly helpful. That's all I'll add, but not everyone has that opportunity. So unless you're bootstrapping, a dollar is a dollar. But if you can get that smart dollar, of course, you make that bet instead.
Awesome. Okay, so a lot, I mean, Sam, you brought up Oven being kind of instrumental to your business. I think we should take a little bit of time, assuming that there are some early stage entrepreneurs in the audience, a little bit of time to highlight some of the government programs that have supported your businesses. They might be grants, accelerators, so from the funding side or support side. Maybe we'll just kind of go around the circle here. We'll start with Shirook again and talk about kind of maybe the number one government program that came to your mind, how it helped your business, and then maybe quickly highlight why they supported your business or what kind of types of companies they typically support. So hopefully it can resonate.
It's very important to understand the funding. Startups go through phases. And for each phase, there is specific funding that supports that those startups in that phase. There is some grants that is dedicated for pre-revenue startups. There is some support that is dedicated for startups that are in the R&D phase. There is some grants that is dedicated for startups that have started to generate revenue. For us, at the beginning, a lot of it was from pitch competitions, from grants for pre-revenue grants. For example, IRAP is a good R&D support from the government, but you need to show a strong traction. You need to show a good direction that you're going through. There is OCI grants as well that were very instrumental, especially for us when we started to test our technology in the field in real world environments. It's not a lab test anymore. We worked with CITM as an accelerator, and through their network as well, we got some funding and some pilots going on in the beginning. But it is, like I say, it's phase by phase, and it's important for the startup to understand and recognize which phase they're in to focus on those grants. And because time is very, very valuable, and resources, especially in a startup, so you want to know where you want to put that effort.
Yeah, I'll pick up that thread a little bit, sure, because early days, everything you do should really be coming down, and I'm going to make a broad statement here, to really two metrics. Is it customer centric, i.e. is it going to lead to revenue one day? Or depending on your business, is it user centric in terms of acquiring users, but not necessarily focusing on that revenue piece? And if you can't really draw a direct line to either revenue or user acquisition, chances are you're not investing your time in the right thing. Of course, there's exceptions to that, but I think it's a pretty good general rule. Along with that, what I'll mention is if you almost come up with a scorecard for funding sources, it can help. So the idea can be dilutive or non-dilutive, strategic or non-strategic, and then just whatever other funding sources are available. And with that in mind, when you pull together your pitch and you're talking to these folks, you could only really need to hear one yes. So you can hear 100 or 200 no's, And there's no silver bullet, right? It's about that hustle, essentially, and making sure that you're getting feedback from every single interaction, you're refining your pitch, and you're knocking on that next door and just kind of keep working at it. With the final piece I'll add there being feedback and no is one thing, and that can be really helpful in terms of if you feel like you're trying to share your story and value, and the entity that you're sharing it with is either not sharing that vision with you or their risk profile isn't quite there, then that's cool. Keep knocking on doors. You're going to find someone who has that shared vision and potentially that shared risk profile. But if you really hear something that kills the basic premise of your vision, then recognize that as well, because you might need to do a pretty hard pivot. And it's better that you learn that early on than at a later stage. So be able to differentiate the no's from something slightly valuable or something that really fundamentally changes your worldview.
I can riff off of that. In our case, in the first couple of years, we had, just like any company, our big pivot moment, and that validation phase or that realization was just about how we packaged our solution, not necessarily the core technology itself. We were going after, in our case, an Airbnb style of market where you would buy an electric vehicle charger, install it, and people would come use it. But what we realized is the need for electric vehicle charging is actually in urban centers. And so in our case, we still took that same MVP technology piece, but packaged it differently and sold it through a different lens. And that's what made the product stick. And that was our, classic pivot moment that I think a lot of young companies go through to get, to make their product sticky, or even just get the traction they need to make it to the next funding round, make it to the next revenue goal, whatever they need.
Yeah, I think, Thomas, that opens up a really interesting topic that entrepreneurs can definitely relate to. Often what we read, in the PR articles and stuff like that, growing a business or getting from round to round sounds kind of like this straight line path. And we know that's never the case, but we often don't hear about, the challenges or the total walls that these companies that we respect so highly have run into. We kind of hear the A to B story. So I think it'd be really interesting. Maybe we'll start with Sam. If you talk about any pivot, big or small, in your business, not every business does a 180. And, Thomas's example is taking the same solution and just packaging it differently, but that's definitely a pivot. So any pivots to highlight in your business, Sam?
Yeah, I think straight line paths exist only in Hollywood, right? Whether that's a romantic relationship or building a business or anything else. So I appreciate that you call that out, Mallory. It's really kind of swervy, and hopefully you're tracking up into the right, after an aggregate period of time. In terms of pivots for us, there's been many, right? So everything from initially we had a vehicle that had lockers on it, and we're still really focused on B2B short haul logistics. So let me take a bit of a step back and introduce Gatik for folks that might not be familiar with it, because otherwise the pivot won't make as much sense. So when I say that we focus on B2B short haul logistics, what I mean is we're currently the only company operating fully driverless autonomous vehicles, both in the US and in Canada now. We just went driverless with Loblaws a few months back, focused on known repeatable routes between fixed assets. So a distribution center for groceries to a retail location, for example, or a micro fulfillment center to a retail location. The reason that we focus on that is we're really good at optimizing and getting the drive route on those specific routes or those specific lanes. We don't do geofenced, and we definitely don't do level 5 autonomy. No one does, which is universal autonomy. So we got really good at essentially commercializing our tech for revenue generating goods movement lanes. And we're the only company focusing on class 3 to class 6 box trucks, or 11 to 26 foot box trucks. We will have a 11-foot autonomous vehicle available for viewing and for discussion later today during the networking session at CITM. So the reason I mention all of that is, how do we get here? We started with a class 2 vehicle that we retrofitted to initially have different lockers on it, and quickly realized that that was not viable as a solution. Then we went to class 2 vans and realized that we just couldn't carry enough freight in that. Then we moved up to class 3 and then went all the way up to class 6 vehicles. Again, in Ontario, we're operating class 2 because that's what's required under the regulatory environment. But in places like Texas, Arkansas, we're operating these larger class 6 vehicles. All of those were pivots. So if we had just stuck with our initial hypothesis, we'd be doing class 2 lockers and not class 6 autonomous box trucks.
Definitely very fluid pivots there. And what about at ESI, Shirook?
Actually, this question, and there are a couple of questions in the chat, I think very tight to the answer that I could participate in. In my view, you have to almost think about direction on a daily basis. There is a lot to learn. As Sam was saying, there's a lot of no's, but those no's are learning no's, and every, I don't know, 100 no's, you get one yes. But that one yes, in my mind and in my experience, comes after small pivots that you do from the no's that what you've learned through the no's that you get. We've pivoted, as Thomas was saying, not in the core technology, but in how we packaged it and the message around it, and how we offer it to the customer, how we showcase the value out of it. As a technical core team, we started the company as a technical core team. To us, we're fond of the technology. We know its ins and outs, but to the customer, we needed to be speaking their language. So the pivots, not just in the marketing and this messaging, but also was in what do they want to see in the data that we provide, what type of scenarios do they want us to deploy in, and that evolved over time. We're over 3 years old, but that came through time because we learned from these conversations and we reflected back on them. So there's a question here: was that the goal from the beginning? Where we wanted to be was clear to us from the beginning, but how we got there wasn't clear from the beginning. So it was a change and an evolution over time. There's a question here about the best advice. You get emotional about your innovation. So I think the best advice that I got was just keep going and take the feedback you get. Don't take it personally. Take it to improve and just keep marching on forward. And if you can march another day, then march another day and leave the decision later on whether or not you want to continue, but keep on at it as long as you can survive another day.
Yeah, I think
I was going to chime in on that.
Chime in.
In our case, one of the valuable things we used as a tool in the early days was we tried to surround ourselves, not in the company as employees, but just in the industry with people who understood the space that we were trying to penetrate. And it's just something as simple as like a half an hour, monthly or quarterly check-in where you can bounce ideas, or, hey, I'm trying to pitch this company. What's the best avenue? What are the best employees within that company to speak to? And just having that network effect allowed us to better refine and be more efficient with who we were targeting in those early days for those, for sales. And going back to my point about validation for the product, they were able to draw parallels to why our product would and would not work in a certain industry context or customer base. I think the lesson to be learned there is that your idea, you can't hide your idea from the world and then expect it to take off. You have to get it out there to every single person you know, and they might provide a different perspective or a different insight that you had not known about earlier. Something I've seen a lot in over the years is a lot of new founders or new innovators tend to keep their ideas secret because they're worried somebody's going to take it and run with it. And I can tell you, people out there aren't looking to steal ideas from a small group. It's more about getting your idea out there amongst everybody you know, so they can provide feedback and validation. And I think that's more of a personal trait. I guess it's a confidence thing on the individual level.
Yeah, I agree, and that's definitely great advice. But I think around the question with the long-term strategy and how has it evolved as your company has grown, we talked about that a lot in the pivot. So I think it's very important for entrepreneurs and their teams to not get too attached to a plan. Knowing that the plan is going to be dynamic is very important, but that's not a reason to throw planning out the window either. What I think is really important, and back when I first started my company, I'm more of an analytical numbers person. Now I work for a bank, so it makes sense. But I thought stuff like vision and mission was just fluff in the early days of starting my company. But I learned as we continued to adapt and pivot the business, that stuff wasn't fluff. That was kind of the North Star. And we could look to that as we were making pivots to say, are we still aligned with kind of our vision? If so, then this pivot makes sense. Sometimes you might look at it and say, hey, wait, no, this isn't quite aligned with the values that we set out or something like that. So maybe this isn't the right direction to go. So long story short, I think planning is important, but don't get too attached to your plan. I think companies that do don't end up being successful. Even later stage companies are always changing. But let's move into Michael's question a little bit more about market research. So his question is, did anyone do formal market research in advance of launching? And what were some of the sources of market insights that led to the pivots? Quickly, your customers are going to provide your best insights once you're kind of in market, or your early pilots are going to provide great insights, and that probably leads to a lot of the pivots. But maybe Sam didn't weigh in on the last one, so we'll let you start here with research and insights.
Sure. Just before I do, based on your last comment, Mallory, there's no formula, right? Some people love vision and mission, and you can go back to that North Star as you're pivoting. Other folks just can't be bothered, and they want to just get that next step the next day, and then maybe see 5 days or a month ahead and just keep growing that way. So I just encourage folks that if you're engaging in this journey, be true to yourself, come up with your own systems and processes. I agree with Thomas, talk to as many people as possible, but recognize that everyone is one data point. So weigh those differently as they mean something very unique and singular to you as you're going through the journey. But in terms of something more tactical, Mars has absolutely brilliant access to different market insight docs. And if you're a client of the Innovation Factory or CITM, then you can access those different research papers and analysis reports for free. So if you're not a client of IF or CITM, let me do a plug-in here because they really are fantastic to work with, and you can get direct access to some of those docs. In terms of the ones we use, the sources, it'll be different, right? We're focused on transportation, we're focused on AI. A big thumbs up from Richard. Yeah, we're focused on different sectors, so you're going to get sector-specific insights. And again, with that grain of salt that I offered, that everyone's journey is different. For us, the core piece we wanted to validate was the TAM. And then from there, what initial customers within that TAM did we want to have conversations with before we started building out something that was overly complex? So we just kind of said, hey, there's a big market here, and we have the attention. Our initial customer is Walmart, so that really helped things right off the bat. We have the attention of Walmart, and that, again, it made conversations easier with investors earlier days. And then final comment on this one, the depth of research that you need to do, it depends on the market that you're looking to either fundraise or sell your product in. It's a really harsh market out there right now, right? Not just the public markets, but that drifted down to the private markets about 6 months back. So typically, investors are going to need a lot more evidence before they reach their funding threshold, their yay or nay. But if you're raising funds last year, you didn't need to do that much market research, relatively speaking, to what you need to do today. So be aware of the macro environments as well before you use a lot of manpower or human hours doing something that you might not need to pursue.
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting can of worms to open that we didn't get to yet. The market is very different today than it was even 6 months ago. So if anyone has any questions around that, feel free to drop them in the chat. But Thomas or
yeah, if someone to add on that research, yeah, again, Mars, same with us, great resource, and that kind of ties into my piece about surrounding yourself with people who know the industry just as well or even better than you. We access those same marketing reports, and again, it may not have given us the exact data point we need, but at least we can check that off the box of, okay, if the experts at Mars haven't come across this, maybe there's a pocket that we are yet to discover. In our particular case in EV charging, many of you see this where there's a lot of conversation around the public charging aspect to electric vehicles. And I think that's just naturally us taking our gas station model and applying it to a new technology. And a lot of the data that we were finding was around public charging, but that cued us to find, why is nobody talking about charging at home? And so that led us down the path of looking into what are the convenience factors, what are the forces at play for charging at home, and then all the different customer demographics. But my point there is now as a company, we are focused on charging at home, not public. And so that opened up a completely new market to us. And that was a result of not finding any data that we were looking into. So just want to provide that insight. With respect to electric vehicles, it's a fairly fresh industry, as you guys know. So one thing that we've battled with over time is the public perception of where these devices need to be installed. So one thing that we've done over the last 6 years is refine our marketing and sales statements to help the average person understand and get it, at the click of a button or reading a simple sentence in an email. Going back to my point about the gas station model with electric vehicles, we say rather in our product information, rather than misleading the customer, we are very explicit in saying, think of charging your vehicle like charging your phone. It charges when you're not using it, which is at home when it's most convenient. And I think for a lot of people that clicks. It sounds very clean now, but that statement was years in the making and lots of trial and error in trying to get the product into a market where it didn't necessarily fit in a clean manner.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I think that was a perfect insight to kind of start to wind this down on. Unfortunately, we didn't directly get to Craig's last question there, which was about reaching out beyond your core team for critical decisions. But I think that was echoed a little bit through some of the other comments. It's important to rely on people outside of yourselves, especially when you're growing a company. It will always feel like you have a gap in your team because you're moving so quickly. But I will pass it over to Richard. That went insanely quickly. Thank you, Sam, Thomas, and Shirook for such great natural conversation. We could have gone on for another hour, but I'll let Richard close things off, and we'll see you all in Hamilton later on.
All right. Thank you very much, Mallory, Sam, Thomas, Shirook. Thank you very much. Good insights as usual. I could say I feel your pain, but I don't directly feel your pain. But I empathize and sympathize a lot with what you go through every day as entrepreneurs. Once again, for those of you in the audience, you are still welcome to attend in Hamilton today at 4 o'clock. We'll put up the slide quickly so you know, but it's at 175 Longwood Road South in the Atrium building. You can still register if you want to get a name tag ahead of time. We'd love to have you there. But in the meantime, thank you very much for attending. The conference will be available in a week or so post-event, maybe sooner if we're lucky, right, on ftms.citm.ca. So if you missed some of the session or want to go watch what the Oshawa breakout was like, you can do that there. So I thank you once again for attending. I look forward to seeing those of you that are attending in Hamilton later this afternoon. And next year, I believe we will be here on November the 2nd. Thank you very much. And again, thank you very much to our panelists.